although there's a kind of a dissonance in the American mind about blue-collar labor, what used to be called the working class, in fact, it's one of the most remarkable experiences of my life, and I would compare all of my professions to teaching, neither one nor the other taking priority. They're all character building. I'm very big on character building. I think I will be till the day I die, you know, that even death is a form of character building. To the point where I was reading an interview with Henry Miller, and he was talking about one of his heroes, Blaise Cendrars. They were best friends when he lived in Paris. And he went to visit him in the hospital when he was dying of lung cancer. And he was suffering and pain. He said, "Why aren't you taking morphine?" And he said, "I'm not taking morphine because I want to know what the experience of death is." You know, and that just startled me, you know, because, you know, like, as I always say, give me the morphine drip, you know. I'll smile, you'll smile, and it'll all be over. But then I really thought about that, you know, I mean, Jesus, you know, it's your last experience, you know. Just as your interior self, not your wife, your daughter, your grandchildren, will be the person that you say goodbye to, the person who's accompanied you all through life, that central character that you go to sleep with every night, who dreams with you, etc. So I'm going to spare all of the notes I took that I thought I would deliver to you in a talk right now so I can get to the poems. And then these things can probably come up in my responses when we have a question and answer or people just talk, okay? So first poem I'm going to read is a poem, you guessed it, about food. I think it'll even make the vegans happy that this poem is called Cloth of Cilantro. You know, I live in a metaphorical world. I mean, I always did. And, you know, food to me, it was no surprise actually that I ended up in the restaurant business. Not just because of the story that my mother used to tell us. That she, whenever we drove out of town anywhere and you saw a field of cows, you used to say, "Look at all those steaks." But because food, metaphorically, to me, is sustenance, literally, and language is sustenance symbolically to me. I've always loved language. I've been in love with language. I love the way words roll off my tongue, the way my lips move, the way other people's tongues and lips move. It's extremely sensual, the enrapturement with language. And this poem is kind of a ode to that. Cloth of Cilantro. I'm taking up the pearls of cloth one more time. I'm doing it without any losses for a change. I'm starting with the cloth of cilantro, starting with the stain of it on my fingers, the ripe smell of its unfurled part, moistening the edges of my nails. I need the most mute processes now. I need the pile of dirt that does not glow with anything. I'm starting with the fragrant underground and the sucked out skin of the green rims that dropped off there. I take up the young cilantro, so much like pearl, where the pearl is floral, and so much like leaf, where the leaf is secreted within my human cells. You can keep your garden. I take up the branch that lives in two atmospheres, and I let it do with me what it wants. Now, when I was starting out all those years ago, I mean, some of us teach, who still teaches Dylan Thomas? I mean, I think people still teach, yay, Dylan Thomas. I mean, how can you not teach, you know, do not go gentle into that good night, death shall have no domain. But you know, the thing with Dylan Thomas, and honestly, I was directed to Dylan Thomas through Bob Dylan. And I don't feel like I'm qualified to say that now since he finally won the Nobel Prize for Literature. I've been saying it my whole life. Dylan's a great poet. you know, he's certainly a great popular poet. And for my money, he's the best poet that wrote in form in the 20th, going into the 21st century. You know, my own preference. But anyways, so I started buying these records and actual vinyls, you know, because there was nothing else in those days. I'm dating myself here. There just simply was nothing else. You know. And, you know, we just listened to them until they were just like, you know, there's like no, you know, treads left on the vinyl, just to hear that voice, which I won't attempt to imitate. But times haven't changed that much. Like I had a student this year who actually I encouraged along the path of writing an essay on, where was it here? Transcendental alcoholism in the songs of Jim Morrison and the poems of Dylan Thomas. So I was glad to see that Dylan Thomas was still alive as a legend. There used to be this little anthology, kind of a fat little anthology. It was edited by a guy named Oscar Williams, a kind of a third-rate Dylan Thomas imitator. And he was the one poet that stood out to me out of all the poets in there. Auden, whoever, respectable, wonderful poets in there. But Dylan Thomas was my poet, my inspiration. Around this time, I was a delivery man for a barbecue restaurant. And I used to keep his collected poems with me. In between deliveries, I'd sit and smoke cigarettes and read him. Only cigarettes, I was delivering. And I call it My Dylan Thomas, because I just feel like he's mine. What a moribund, romantic oratory, plaid on plaid, delight husky, dressed up and disheveled man. Distracted by the end of himself at either end, without a chance of a reasonable chance, flying drunk, drowned in a shot glass, flew into me. When I delivered in West Hollywood for Mr. Jim's You Need No Teeth to Eat My Beef barbecue. When I was the tip slave smiling 18-year-old at the door with my aluminum-covered chicken, brisket of beef, hot links, cornbread, ribs, and sauce, and I tried to write poems like his. The food beside me, between deliveries, pulled over, hunched in my car, in my head, rush of my consonants, my vowels, my slanted moods. His little round boy drunkard's face right on the cover of the old Oscar Williams paperback anthology of poems I took with me everywhere, ignoring the 41 other non-faces on the same cover, because he was the one. He had it. Way down, he had it inside the rootlet swinging nerve ends. Everything else read like pallor. Those other poets didn't get it. I owned his poems by the voice, by the neck, by the larynx, folded mega-vowel, tied lyric, feeding the human throat, his throat anyway. Man, I was 18, the once of an excruciating once. I'll take it. I threw it back quick enough, too quick, as quick as it takes. His language, exotic, half-comprehensible, floating boy, only once, tragedy talk, ecstatic or not so ecstatic, and the whiskey gauze boredom living sound that he sang, that swung that way, that mostly mournful sand hill mine shaft caving in of sound and mood swing, that death in the middle of life, closer to the middle of the middle, in the middle of Jameson whiskey, in the middle of his first son's birth, in the middle of his daughter wetting the bed, in the middle of a sand crab cracking heron, in the middle of the struck shell salt blood mess, in the middle of his wife soaking braid behind her wet neck switching, in the middle of Auld Lang Syne, in the middle of a commercial, in the middle of the Welsh woods, in the middle of relocation, concentration, reservation camps, in the middle of raw eggs and stout. Amazing to be spelled out by those few poems in the anthology, that language of a legend. Who can sing like the canary of Rhiannon? I could pass now for the cuckoo of Cardiff Avenue, or the music box of a crab shell shut down on the hollow sand, oil dead, detergent dead, sand, some of it. I have my blackbirds, my bush tits, my sparrows, but I'm more of a potato than a bird because I'm more of the ground than anything else. Except for mockingbirds, I'm trapped with mockingbirds. As far as birds go, they don't look like they're supposed to stir up anything. So drab, so way beyond plain, those mockers. In singing, they are only second to the cardinal, and I've heard them when they make cardinals sound dull. In singing, thinking of him, the cardinal is alone in that language. Languette of his throatful erections, she hears him. I hear him. The leaves open their skins to him. Just about everything opens to him. I still have the old Dylan Thomas Cardinal legend, scratched voice, roiling waters, vinyl shore, pub roaring voice, tide receding sound, in the middle of the morning vowels, in the middle of the consonants, and the consonantal stream in his mouth, in the middle of the waves folded, surging and dropping, in the middle of the day, and his throat still in my head, in my heels, in the middle of the Ocean Park tram ride, in the June light that started up my eyes on the topping waves, and that voice of his singing over the undertow in my head, still there, still. I was 18 at the beginning of the night before I took my ribs, my chicken, my sauce. When I was offered acid or grass instead of money for tips in the Hollywood Hills and Laurel Canyon. When I walked into the synagogue cantoral leaking, blood clot singing, whiskey mouth language pollen wail, reading hymn until the big order came out and I loaded up at the beginning of the night. Mournful syllable sweating, dressed to die as he said he always was. Wing made of his tongue, height flown down from, leading me somewhere. So when I was a little boy, it's kind of wild to think of yourself as a little kid, you know? I mean, it really is, you know? I mean, because you're really the same person. I don't care how much you change. There's some essential kernel that we're born with, you know? So anyways, I was lucky enough to have shared a duplex with my mother's parents, and the last two, my youngest aunt and uncle on that side. And I got to know my grandmother a little bit, actually quite well. My grandmother famously said to me one day when she was between husbands, her husbands died, Dorny, you know, because she's an old Ukrainian Jew. She called me Dorny. Dorny, when I was 14, I wanted to kiss all the boys. I don't know why. Ma's ma. Toward the end of her life. After she stopped calling her own children because she knew no one could bear her cynical crying and all of her organs were bitter, and she shook her head at her useless ankles and tore off a piece for me from a braided horn of pastry. I didn't say a thing, just looked at the rough edges of the big hand she chopped calf liver and chicken skin with. The cleaver, a loud clicking toy in her grip. Then one of the big arms caught up in her robe, and she turned it through the sleeve finally and distinguished with her fingers the candies and bus transfers, makeup and coupons, unused for months, and worried and looked for and didn't find a great-grandchild's gift, complaining the whole time about the smell in her purse, worrying about the lost thing, a wrapper, a pencil with lead broken off, weeping with neurotic vulnerability about the smell, then took my hand, giving that look, shaking her head from side to side, delighted beyond what I perceived, watching her tilt and raise her face in that manner, rising on her toes, aged into rough thorns, coming through one slipper, shifting her eyes over my eyes, tilting her head, grabbing my face in her hands, kidding me, saying, "How homely you are! Who will ever marry you?" So when I was a carpenter, I used to meet these old guys, old carpenters. Man, they were characters. I mean, these guys who, like, some of them refused to even use power tools because it was beneath them. They had to show their power and their strength. It wasn't macho. It was really just a manliness kind of a thing. Now, I'll cut that by hand. The guys just take a saw and just cut it. You know, we're all there going, oh my God. And these guys, they had arms like Popeye. You know what I mean? I mean, they were really amazing. They kind of walk into the room like, you know, you thought they were carrying toolboxes, their arms, you know. So one of these guys who I became friends with, he was a communist. And he had been blacklisted. And he had to deal with some things because of that, you know, because he had to shift from jobs to jobs where he could work in a kind of clandestine manner when he was a young man. And he gave me a belt sander, an old belt sander. I think it was the first Craftsman, which is Sears, belt sander, in that first belt sander assembly line that they came out of. It was kind of a mixture of aluminum and different alloys. And I still have it. And this guy wanted me to sell it as an antique. And I'm drowning myself up here. I mean, Jesus, you know. Belt sander. You guys know what a belt sander is? That sander, it's really high power. You know, and you're sanding out really rough. You go from rough to medium to whatever. Made sure, responding to a neighbor, I loaned my belt sander, holding back to forego without having to tell him, without getting into FBI 1950s blacklist history connected to the belt sander, that I didn't have the kind of interest in antiques I needed to have to follow through with his advice, though he said I had one. Better check out what's happening online. There's buyers for an old model like this one. I said I would, but I didn't, though I nodded like I would, because I'm against the system that works that way. What buyers? In that world, there's only suckers. I could never be a collector. I have an aversion to selling and hoarding. How can you believe in the worth of unreal value? It's a kind of undoing to me. He said to look up what's happening on some email or something, some international classictool.com link he recommended, but I didn't. I nodded like I would, and I said I would. Then I gave him enough oranges to fill his hat and sent him on his way, as the phrase used to go. Because that was somebody, one of those times in this life, one of those emotions of expecting someone and knowing someone like that who changes things you had no idea how you could have until after it was done. After the connection and the person's image inside of you from the contact split between you. I inherited a belt sander from a metal worker, machinist from the blacklist days in the 50s. When I met him, he was one of those lanky, all hands and calluses type of old carpenter and plumber, naturally compelled to contend with a tool that could twist or sprain a bigger man's wrist if he didn't know how to set his hips straight. And you get to know from him there are rhythms. There are ways to square up your legs and your spine, set your shoulders and jaw in a position you didn't know you needed to know. Two rollers speed out the front drive dynamo, their forelegs and the aluminum hindquarters humping, shaped for smoothing, derived from a fantasy of smoothing. It comes up from the hands. The fingertips are mystics. The fingers can translate a porous curve, landing a belt sander's weight made precise for the surface, then split away, releasing the trigger. The wires inside the handle grip hot from long use you still retain after it cools. And you put it up there in an elevated box, the way he showed you, on a shelf less wide than the one below it, hard for a thief to find. So I have an older brother, 8 years older, and people always say, how is that? Don't you want your brother to be, siblings to be? I said, no, man. I said, I was lucky. My brother was my third parent. When I was lost as a teenager, I mean like lost. I mean like no one knew my whereabouts kind of lost, literally and emotionally. My brother was there. My brother was like a legend to me. 8 years ahead, I'm in middle school lost. And he's in Sweden as an exchange student, going on summer break, buying a World War II BMW sidecart motorcycle to go across Europe and to get to Greece. And I'm going, wow. I got these pictures, hair, going on, this motorcycle, his beard out to here, So I was 14, and he sent me this postcard. It's a beautiful postcard. It's from the museum in Athens, and it's a boy jockey. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And he's about 14. This is my brother. I mean, my brother and I if people have siblings who are close, you know what I mean. I mean, it's your brother. I mean, you're sons together. Yeah, you share things that no one else in the world knows about. Huh? A real intimate kind of connection. So my brother, being my brother, sent me this postcard of this boy. And of course, I'm looking at it. I'm 14. I don't know shit about, Greek mythology or Greek culture. I mean, I'm trying to find how I'm going to get some money to give to some girl who I want to ask to go steady, get an ID bracelet. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and he's in the air. It says boy jockey, marathon, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, well, it's my introduction to Greek culture, but I don't know what the hell it means. So about 12 years later, I go to Greece, and I go into the museum in Greece, and I walk around a bend, and I come to this area, and the boy jockey is there, and he's beautiful. He's all green bronze, and just the epitome of youth for a boy. And the horse is there. The bronze horse is now under the boy jockey. And a few years later, I wrote this poem. Because I miss my brother. I always miss my brother. What returns? I was at a Greek festival with my wife and some of the family. So I was reminded of the Greek experience. Pico and Normandy are two streets in Los Angeles where there's an Orthodox Greek church, where they have a courtyard where they have the big festival. At Pico and Normandy, at the Greek festival, I was thinking in Greek about my brother, sending a postcard from the Archaeological Museum in Athens, a color photo of a boy jockey about my age, 14, in midair, riding alone. I pinned the rider by the night lamp, mounted on the invisible horse, a 4x6 card, his legs clasping the body, not there, still carrying him, the light gold brown in the lampshade. And the Greeks placed him, still admiring him, suspending him high up over the wood base, the delight of the boy, uplifted, astride, held up by a steel bar, his boy's face carried straight ahead, fast, and without his horse, for now an imagined horse. At the Pico and Normandy of Greece, on my journey, in the almost bare corridor, in the roped-off exhibition, the boy jockey rode his racehorse, pounding ahead, rediscovered, the Aegean Sea somewhere, retrieved for him, reassembled 12 years after my brother, the horse, the blue-green bronze, the divers raised it up. What care, drawn to the place, drawn by their tentative maps, the approximate knowledge, forelegs and hind legs striding, the neck fur blown toward his hand again, the force, the shape of the leg muscles stretched as though struggling up through layers of the sea floor, through all the outlasted currents, to him, really, to anyone standing by that frail rope, missing the lost animal, returned to the land, to the imagined racetrack, to the brothers Pico and Normandy, to a brother missing a brother. This was published, not that I'm a communist, way too far to the left to be a communist. But it was published in an anti-capitalism journal. It's called Straw Hill. Anybody ever live in Oregon? No? Well, you know, there's hardly any work up there, you know, so it's kind of, the poem was kind of conceptualized in Oregon. When I drove about the same distance I drove to Foothill for the minimum wage, you know, because Oregon school systems, they don't care. You know, they're just too poor to care. But I realized that I could be worse off. Straw Hill. You could end up worse off down the highway at Straw Hill. That's the worst straw ever. Nickel refinery, recycling, dump rest area, toilet maintenance jobs, unlimited, waiting for who's next at Straw Hill. You think you can make it in a remote place? You're wrong. Don't give it a chance. Even if you're not alone, stay away from Straw Hill. Whether you've got a lover or not, whether you've got a dog or not, whether you're gifted with efficiency, making it with your case of kidney beans and day-old bread or not. Even if you get it down to the roots, don't let insight make you too cocky. Don't come near Straw Hill, but face the fact. It wasn't just Straw Hill. Since I was 18 and stood 8 hours a day in Jake L's shoe repair, gluing soles, grinding heels, getting paid under the minimum, under the table, I always attacked. I always hated any form of business. Western and all the Western. Hemisphere's corporate property management armed services, Nosferatu investors, the gross money, the net money, whatever the country, whatever the economic system, wherever the capitalist, state capitalist, fake communist, saccharine socialist, Vichy gangster, mob gang banker brain operates. Luckless, future, laid-off business majors, don't go around like you're some hereditary peer, owners, admirals, bankers, top-of-the-landed military spawn or descendant. You're going to end up with the rest of us, working at the house of suction. Any job you have, electrodialysis technicians, computer programmers, laid-off dot-commers, waitresses, freelancers for loose change, scabs in the sewers, bankrupt corn sweetener and denim investors, genetic pirates, moonlighters for cesspool drainage, gas meter readers and digital meter computators, postal slaves, penitentiary fry cooks, Radio Shack heads, maids, meter maids, assembly line workers, any of the lines, handicapped Xerox persons, rock star whores, sausage stuffers, defunct adjunct professors, all kinds of maintenance people, meat cutters, part-time and lifetime grocery baggers, carcinogized insulation installers, painters who end up sniffers and that cancer, plutonium pounders and uranium handlers and those cancers, military flip-outs, depleted uranium gunners and that cancer, Agent Orange fuelers and pilots, meltdown cleanup crews and this and that cancer, half-time when you need full-time, split shifts, partial shifts, 6 days, overtime, no overtime, layoffs, 20-minute strikes, pennies of raises, no smoking, no dating, no jerking off in the bathrooms, this location when you need the other one, decreases of increases, bonuses, schmonuses. Since I was 18, I hated it. I was never right with the economy of anything. Even as a kid, the few times I played Monopoly, I never handled much of the multicolored money. I was nervous about having more than one house. I didn't do well accumulating apartments. All I wanted when we played Monopoly was to be the shoe. All right, let me read a couple of love poems. Like you're not voluntarily cornered, let me. My Boat, My Waves. This is about kind of a honeymoon experience on the island of Crete. And my wife got me this, not this one, this is the sequel. This is the Ram. But before this, I had a little boat, and it looked like a Greek ship. We used to always call it Odysseus's boat. Anyways, I hook on the boat my medallion from Crete. A never-replaced chain holds it through the loop. I wear the necklace with a boat to remember what happened when I made the stops I shouldn't have. Though mostly it has been a life throughout I never had to say, shouldn't have sailed when the sailing was good. I wear the medallion to remember the storm between Mykonos and Crete that tipped the Cretan fishing boat with such force I thought it wouldn't recover. I set out to keep in mind the boat moving around my chest hair, my waves, and the storm you can't see coming, and the water where some fishermen learn not to go, that place their wives dread. I wear the necklace for protection. I wear it to remind me that the one who gave it to me, reaching up, hooking it together, found it on Crete in a shop in Agio Nicholas called the Big Cheap Store, where in fact nothing was cheap. And mostly there was only one of everything for sale, and the bartering wasn't easy, but it was made. I know that it can be hard to sit through poetry readings, so I'm going to cut a couple poems here. But I do want to read this poem. I love Ray Charles. You guys like Ray Charles? Does anybody not know who Ray Charles is? Well, good. Because he's a legend like Dylan Thomas in my book. The great Ray Charles. Remember the first time you heard Ray Charles? You couldn't stop moving. I mean, you just literally couldn't stop moving. I was driving in a car, someone was driving me to school, and I Got a Woman came over. I got a woman way over town, she's good to me, you know, and his piano playing. So anyways, Ray Charles live. Of course, this is after he's dead. Anybody ever been to Hollywood? You guys know Hollywood, know where Las Palmas Avenue is and all those places? All right, cool. I saw Ray Charles coming down Las Palmas Avenue off Hollywood Boulevard. He wasn't blind. He had on one of those white tux blazer entertainment outfits with black pants, black satin grosgrain stripe down the outer pant leg seam. I just stepped off the number 9 yellow bus when I saw him heading over to his car parked there on Hollywood Boulevard with the trunk open. No one recognized him. No one noticed it was Ray Charles carrying a bunch of 1x4-inch pine wood, loading it into the trunk of his car, a kind of limousine, but a compact limo, a mini limo, no bigger than a Prius 5 type limo, probably made in China, probably made special for him because he's Ray Charles. No idea dressed for a gig where he was going, what he was planning for, the show, nodding to his rhythms behind his wraparound shades, the ones he was always known for. No idea what he was going to do with the pine wood or why no one stopped him to say, like sometimes people do to a celebrity who might have been going to build a protective barrier around his Hollywood sidewalk star, something like, "Hey, you're Ray Charles. My grandmother used to smoke Panama Red, drink Cutty Sark with one ice cube, and trip out to your music when she was depressed by one of my alcoholic grandfather's put-downs, or maybe when she was laid off for the 19th time, or one of those other times when she wanted to blow up the economic textbook section of her local bookstore near the community college, where she took a few night classes in ceramics when there still were reach out to the community college ceramic classes you could take 9-something times. She'll be so stoked to know you're not blind. One time, you know, when I was over there raking and cleaning up the yard for her, she said to me, "Come in here a minute and listen to something. Listen to the way Ray Charles sings, 'Baby, Please Don't Go.' He's so desperate, he says, 'I'll be your dog.' She's going 1,800-something miles away to New Orleans just to be out of his company for her reasons on her terms. I mean, he's losing his lover or his wife, maybe went through kicking heroin addiction with her. Maybe she'd been with him for 20-something years, then treats him like a dog, makes him think it's okay for a human being to be a dog for someone. And he's blind on top of it. My life can't be so bad." All right, I'm going to end with this, typically to deconstruct all seriousness, a poem to monkeys. Very special monkeys from Japan, Himalayan monkeys. I saw this documentary, and it was so moving to me what I saw that I literally just went and sat down and wrote and revised 800 times this poem. Himalayan monkey life. Isn't that the coldest freezer in history up in the Japanese Himalayas? And that spider monkey nomad clan in the extreme cold my religion derives from. Because the suckling monkeys ride their mothers' backs or on one of the males that protect the clan. And the incidental rapist is attacked until he's chased out of sight into the forest. And none of them are destitute or take more honey or insect larvae out of tree bark than they can eat. And one of their skeletons hangs in a museum in Oklahoma, so we might understand the sanity of living in trees apart from predators, if that's what it takes. And because they have no designs for what the predators hoard and maintain, and they have the agility you develop moving around in the middle canopy where they are isolated, safe, and mostly frugivorous. And the way they clean each other with concern and go off in privacy when first the female is ready and makes her decision, and the male too preens himself from the peak in that part of himself. And when a spider monkey sees a human approaching, it growls menacingly or barks loudly, similar to a dog, and will defecate or urinate or throw branches toward the intruder, but never willfully attack. And because they have social bonds that last their entire lifetime, and because they huddle together when things more frozen than they look when they are frozen get to them, and they descend to a hot spring pool the villagers enlarged and walled in for them, because they are grateful for the link they've brought down to them. And how could I predict seeing them in the hot mineralized water, with eyes closed under raised eyebrows, stroking the daughter's or the son's or the grandchild's head, or a brother's or a sister's or an aunt's or an uncle's whiskers in a red face, and picking insect food from their fur, because they too like to satisfy the tongue hanging out. And I see them fondling each other, or do something but soaking in the hot minerals and the steam together, and the way it is clear they understand euphoria. Thank you.